Yo, what is up guys, Elviskin here, welcome back to another Budget Commander deck. If you guys haven't seen the first Budget Commander deck in which I did Sign of the Erd Dragon, I will put a link to that in the description. What this is we are going to build a EDH deck that hopefully is competitive and is fairly cheap. Today will be an $80 budget deck, and yeah. So the commander we are building around today is Oloro, the Ageless Ascetic. Oloro, the Ageless Ascetic, is a 4/5 for 3, a white, blue, and black. At the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 2 life. Whenever you gain life, you may pay 1 mana, and if you do, draw a card, and each opponent loses a life. In addition, at the beginning of your upkeep, if Oloro is in the command zone, you gain 2 life. So you're gaining 2 life on your upkeep, no matter where he is, as long as you don't put him in hand or grave or exile or whatever. So that is a very good card because you're going to gain quite a bit of life off of that, especially with other cards that we will get to later. But basically, the main thing with Oloro is you can either just park him in the command zone all day and gain a bunch of life while you play cards that have synergy with that, or you play him when you gain life, you pay mana, you drain your opponents, you draw a bunch of cards, and you get a lot of advantage that way. So first things first, we're going to go through the 1 mana rock we are playing, and that is a Soul Ring. Everyone knows what Soul Ring is. You pay 1 mana to add 2 to your mana pool. So that's pretty self-explanatory. I put that in there just because white, black, and blue, in and of itself, pretty much has no ramp whatsoever. And so I thought it would make it fairly useful. So yeah. Alright, so I kind of categorized this into a few different categories of cards. In the last Budget Commander, I separated it by card type. Today, I'm going to be separating it by what you want to use these cards for. So first up, we're going to have draining your opponent. There's a lot of cards that interact with each other, with you gaining life, or with you attacking your opponents, that allow you to deal quite a lot of damage to your opponents. First up, we have Duskmantle Seer. Duskmantle Seer is a 4/4 for 2 blue and black. With flying, at the beginning of your upkeep, all players reveal the top card of their library, loses life equal to the card's CMC, and put it into their hand. So this is a great way to kind of chip in some damage, even at the cost of your opponents getting a card. And it's just a good way, and also it doesn't affect you that much because you have life to burn via all the life that you will be gaining. Next up, we have Cliffhaven Vampire. Cliffhaven Vampire is a 2/4 for 2 white and black. With flying, whenever you gain life, each opponent loses a life. A 2/4 for 4 is a fairly good blocker. It'll help block creature tokens and stuff, and you're going to be gaining life a lot, so this will be a quick target for your opponents, which will help you open up some of your better creatures. More offensive-minded creatures, I should say. Next up, Kingpin's Pet. Kingpin's Pet is our first Extort creature. Extort is a trigger that says whenever you cast a spell, you may pay a white or a black, and if you do, each opponent loses a life, and you gain that much life. So this is very OP in multiplayer games, because you can pay a mana pretty much and gain 3, 4, 5 life, depending on how many players you're playing with. Other than that, it is a 2/2 with flying for 3. Next up, we have Chancellor of the Dross. Chancellor of the Dross is a 7 mana 6/6 with flying and lifelink, and you may reveal it from your opening hand. If you do, at the beginning of the first upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life, and you gain life equal to the life lost this way. That's like a 9 life head start if you have 3 players. That's a crazy amount of life that you gain, and that's just pretty OP. Tithe Drinker is a very good creature. For 2 mana, you get a 2/1 with lifelink and Extort. And mainly, these creatures, you don't necessarily swing with them unless you have someone open, and it's a good early game play because people may be open after turn 2 to gain life, but you really want it for the Extort trigger. Next up is a card I recently packed in Ravnica Allegiance, and I love it. It is Ill-Gotten Inheritance. It is a 4 mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain a life. And you can pay 6 mana to sack it and deal 4 damage to target opponent and gain 4 life. That's a very fun card to have. Next up is Throw Parasite. It is a 1 mana 1/1 with Extort, and you can tap it and pay 2 to remove a counter from target non-land permanent. This is very good if your opponent's playing +1/+1 counters or -1/-1 counters, and very useful just to kind of control the board just a little bit. Next up is one of my favorite cards in the deck. It is Pontiff of Blight. It is a 2/7 for 6 with Extort, and other creatures you control get Extort. The fun thing about Extort is that multiple Extort triggers are not redundant. So, if a creature has 2 Extort triggers on it, you can pay 2 mana to trigger both of the Extort triggers and gain a lot of life. You could cast a spell for like 1 mana and then Extort 5 times, and that could be a very useful turn for you. Next up is Viscofa Confessor. It is a 5 mana 1/3 with Extort. When it enters the battlefield, you may pay any amount of life. Target opponent reveals that many cards from his or her hand. You choose one of them and exile it. This is a very useful control card. Also kind of just useful. Revealing your opponent's hand is very useful for information purposes. Maybe if someone's in the lead, or if you know that someone may have a counterspell in hand that you want to be able to forecast. Next up is Basiliscus Creature. It is a 1/2 with flying for 2 with Extort. Pretty self-explanatory. So that is all we have in terms of draining opponents, necessarily. So next up, we're going to go with alternative life gain methods. This is ways that you may gain life that don't necessarily involve extorting people or draining them. First up is a Johnny's Welcome. A Johnny's Welcome is a 1-mana enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. The good thing about this deck is that it gets a lot of triggers off of when you gain life. And so it doesn't matter if I'm gaining 1 life or if I'm gaining 40, I still get that trigger. And so that makes a 1-mana gain life a valuable trigger to have. Next up is Sunscorched Regent. Sunscorched Regent is a 5-mana 4/3 with flying. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you put a +1/+1 on Sunscorched Regent and gain a life. Again, another gain life trigger. In addition, it can get really big really fast. Also, your opponents are going to want to remove that fast. This is another card that will burn your opponent's removal. Next up is Revival Revenge. This is another split card from Ravnica Allegiance. Revival costs 2 hybrid mana of Orzhov variety. You can return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your grave to the battlefield, or Revenge, which is 6 mana, double your life total. Target opponent loses half their life rounded up. So, double your life total is the keyword here, because if I have 100 life, if I get to 200, that's pretty much Scoopville for my opponents. Next up is Kembal, Console of Allocation. It is a 2/3 for 3. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, you drain that player for 2. So this is a very good, again, removal burner, but also your opponents are going to have to kind of work around that. A Johnny's Mantra is a 2-mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you gain a life. Again, gaining life triggers are amazing and fun and cool. So we definitely want to utilize that in a way that's going to get us good things. Soul Warden is a 1-mana 1/1. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain a life. This is a very good card in the fact that this deck does have a decent amount of creatures for a life gain deck, which life gain decks don't necessarily utilize that as much. Next up is Paradox Haze. I love this card. Paradox Haze is a 3-mana enchantment. You enchant a player, and at the beginning of enchanted player's first upkeep each turn, that player gets an additional upkeep step. So that means, in terms of Oloro, you're gaining 4 life instead of 2. And there are a bunch of other upkeep cards that last in this deck that will help you with that. Soul's Attendant is a 1-mana 1/1. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you may gain 1 life. There are a lot of cards in this deck that just cause you to gain life because people are playing the game. And so that just makes you kind of hard to keep out of the life gain realm, because you gain life literally for almost everything. Next up is Spirit Loop. Spirit Loop is a 2-mana enchantment, which you enchant creature you control. Whenever it deals damage, you gain that much life, and when it is put into a graveyard from play, return Spirit Loop to its owner's hand. Now, I would have to look at the errata from this, but when I googled it, I'm pretty sure Spirit Loop is not lifelink. So you can give this to a creature with lifelink, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, to make it you gain double the damage that it deals, which is absolutely busted. Next up is a really great card. Suture Priest is a 2-mana 1/1. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you may have that player lose a life. So, draining opponents again, and again, gaining life via playing the game, and also hurting your opponents for playing the game. Next up, we have a beautiful combination. I don't necessarily like infinite combos, but this one is, it's kind of expensive, so this was one I would definitely leave out. Sanguine Bond is a 5-mana enchantment. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. And Exquisite Blood is whenever whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. So basically, these combo off in that if I have Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood on the field at the same time, let's say, for ease's sake, during my upkeep, I gain 2 life off of Oloro, which causes my opponent to lose 2 life off of Sanguine Bond, which causes me to gain 2 life because of Exquisite Blood, which causes my opponent to lose too much life off of Sanguine Bond, and so on and so forth. So those cards are very useful in the fact that it's an infinite combo, but I would say it's a fairly weak one because it requires 2 enchantments on the board, and your opponents will not let you get that up. I sincerely doubt that your opponents will not target that removal. But enchantment removal is kind of crazy. So we'll see. Vampire Nighthawk is a 2/3 for 3 with flying, death touch, and lifelink. This is a kind of a scary one because your opponents don't want to. It'll deter them from attacking you with their large creatures, and so it kind of just hurts them a lot, and it de-incentivizes them from attacking you. Shattered Angel is a 3/3 for 5, along the lines again of you gain 1,000,000 life from your opponents playing the game. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under opponent's control, you may gain 3 life. So once again, this is just adding to the types of cards that allow you to gain life for everything that happens in the game. Viscopa Guildmage is a 2/2 for 2. You can pay 1 white and black to give target creature lifelink until end of turn, and you can also pay 1 white and black to whenever you gain life this turn, each opponent loses that much life. This is a very funny card because it just allows you to drain your opponents even faster, and it's beautiful. This one is the most expensive card in the deck, but I highly recommend you get it. This one I would say is optional, but it is very useful. A Hammeret's Archive is a 5-mana artifact. Whenever you gain life, you gain double that life instead. And whenever you draw a card, except for the first card that you would draw each turn, you draw twice that many cards. That gaining double life is the key word here. That is so much. Remember that sorcery that says double your life? How about we quadruple our life? How crazy would that be? I guess it's tripling our life because you only gain 100 because you don't gain. But yeah, that's crazy. Next up, we have Daxos of Meletis. Daxos of Meletis is a 2/2 for 3. It cannot be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. So basically the only way to kill it is to remove it or block it with a 2-power creature or multiple 1-power creatures. Also, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you exile the top card of that player's library, you gain life equal to its CMC, and until end of turn you can cast that card and pay mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. So this is a good card to attack players that have synergy with your deck, maybe, or attack players that maybe you just want to play some big cards. I remember using this on an Eldrazi deck once. Whew! I just kind of stormed the battlefield with that. Next up, we have Obsidian Ghost Council. When Obsidian Ghost Council enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 2 and you gain 2. And at the beginning of your end step, you may exile it. If you do, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of your next upkeep. It gains haste. So, if you have a fairly decent board state, you just blink Obsidian. Well, I guess you don't blink Obsidian because it doesn't blink. It does leave the field until your turn. So, but it's just a way to continuously drain your opponents and gain a bajillion life. Augury Adept is a 3-mana 2/2. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand and gain life equal to its CMC. This is also a good card to help you kind of draw through your deck and kind of just get whatever you need. And last but not least, Chalice of Life is a 3-mana artifact. You can tap it to gain a life, and if you have at least 10 life more than your starting total, which you undoubtedly will, You transform Chalice of Life, and it transforms into Chalice of Death, which you can tap to have target opponent lose 5 life. So this is kind of a good way to accelerate the game in an otherwise slow deck, because this deck does not do a lot quick. It is very, very slow. So that is all for the alternative life gain creatures. We are now going to move on to the next category of cards, which is life gain synergy. So this is stuff that is going to occur when you gain life. And I think that is fairly useful. So, we're going to start with Sunbond. Sunbond is a 4-mana aura enchant creature. Whenever you gain life, you put that many +1/+1 counters on this creature. That's going to make your creature really fucking huge and just really pop off. And this is very useful. Maybe you put it on a Johnny's Pridemate, so whenever you gain life, you put double that +1/+1 counters. It's crazy, dude. It's just crazy. So that's one where you get a lot of triggers out of it. Sarah Avatar is a 7-mana star. Its power and toughness are equal to your life total. When it's put into a graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into its owner's library. So let's say we just play a 70/70 for 7. Yeah, that's pretty good. The only issue with this is that it is blockable. It doesn't have any sort of evasion like flying or island walk or whatever. But we have ways around that. We definitely have ways around that. Leonin Lore Leader is a 4-mana 4/4. Whenever it attacks, you create 2 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink that are tapped and attacking. This is important because if you swing with this, you are guaranteed getting 2 life gain triggers, because each of the cats life gain triggers separately, and so that will help you drain your opponents out quick. And so this is a very good card for 4-mana. Speaking of evasion, Protective Bubble is a 4-mana aura. You enchant creature, and it is unblockable and has Shroud. So you put that on your Sarah Avatar, and you just murder them. Because if this gets off, they pretty much have no way to stop you other than board wipes, I think. Yeah, I don't think... or they could destroy the enchantment and then destroy the creature. But there's not a whole lot we can do. This is just a funny card. This is just the ultimate FU. Magister Sphinx is a 7-mana 5/5 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, target player's life total becomes 10. So in an otherwise slow format, this card just burns someone bad. So you just use it to kind of just end the game with the player in the lead. And that's just really funny. Well of Lost Dreams is a 4-mana artifact. Whenever you gain life, you may pay X, where X is less than or equal to the amount of life you gained, and draw X cards. So this is kind of, again, off of triggers. You can pay any, and it's useful that you can pay any amount of mana to do it. So I can pay 1 to draw 1 if it's a good mana sink for sure. For sure. Belladar Sovereign, 6-mana, 4/6 with Vigilance and Lifelink. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 40 or more life, you win the game. This is going to be red alert. We need to get our opponent below 40 life or destroy his Belladar Sovereign. So this kind of is a way to... You don't necessarily need to play this to win the game unless you think you can. But it's more a way of kind of, let's stop the game. My opponents have to burn probably a turn's worth of mana to deal with this guy. And then we can continue the game. And that kind of buys you some time to just do whatever you want. Next up is Cryptghast. Oh, Cryptghast. 4-mana 2/2 with Extort. And whenever you tap a swamp for mana, you add a black to your mana pool. We're running quite a decent amount of swamps because swamps are cheap, because basic lands are cheap. And so this will allow you to ramp quite a bit. I've casted Magister Sphinx on turn 4 with this guy. And yeah. Victory's Herald is a 6-mana 4/4 with flying. Whenever it attacks, all attacking creatures gain flying and lifelink until end of turn. So this is very good because it kind of just, it gives you another form of evasion, because you can swing with that and Sarah Angel and kill somebody with it. And so I think this is a very good card for that reason. Another way to give your Sarah Angel flying is On Sarah's Wings. It is a 4-mana aura. Enchanted creature is legendary, has +1/+1, and flying, lifelink, and vigilance. For 4 mana, that's a lot of things that I just said. I think this is a very good card, just value-wise, because it is just so beautiful. So good. Plague of Vermin. Oh, baby. This is also a way you can end the game. This is a nice win con. 7 mana sorcery. Starting with you, each player can pay any amount of life. Repeat this process until nobody pays life. Each player puts a 1/1 black rat creature into play for each 1 life he or she paid this way. If you're at 90, just sink 40 mana and 40 life into this. You get 41 rats. In addition, if you have one that's like whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you gain a life, you can pay all of your life except for, let's say, 5 in case your opponent has a burn spell, and put all those rats on the battlefield and gain that life back, which will also trigger things. So this is a very nice win con that can also be used in a number of versatile ways. I don't expect your opponents to be paying too much life to get 1/1s, but you never know. For the next card, we have Cradle of Vitality. It is a 4 mana enchantment. Whenever you gain life, you may pay a 1 in white, and if you do, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature for each life you gained. So that's crazy. That's a good card just based on the fact that it's another mana sink, and if you gain a lot of life off of things, you just can pump a creature really, really, really big. Next up is Ajani's Pridemate, which I alluded to earlier. It is a 2 mana 2/2. Whenever you gain life, you may put a +1/+1 counter on it. Not for each life you gain. It's only based on the number of life gain triggers that you had. So that's a kind of drawback, but it's still really good. Next, we have Angelic Accord. Angelic Accord is a 4 mana enchantment at the beginning of each end step. If you gain 4 or more life this turn, which you undoubtedly will unless you play really poorly, or you get unlucky, more likely, you create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. This is really good because it gets you flyers, it gets you triggers, it gets you blockers. It's a really catch-all for things this deck is lacking. Last but not least, we have Minion of the Waste. It is a 6 mana minion with trample. When it enters the battlefield, you pay any amount of life, and its power and toughness are equal to the amount of life that you paid. So this is a very big card because you can pump it up big, and it has trample, so you can just pump it up really big and then blow through your opponents with it. Last but not least, before we get to our lands, we have a bunch of control. This is things that are going to slow down your opponents so that you can gain more life and get better cards in play because your deck is very slow. So we have Aqua's Form. It is a 1 mana enchant creature. That creature cannot be blocked, and when it attacks, you scry 1. So that's a very good card in the fact that you get to scry 1 and your creature's unblockable, so you can put it on Sarah Angel. Next up, Whisper Silk Cloak is a 3 mana equipment that you equip for 2, and equip creature has an unblockable Enshroud. Again, you put this on your Daxos, you put this on your Augury Adept, you put this on Sarah Avatar, and you kind of just run through everything. Next up, we have Jessian Balm Giver. Again, along the same lines, it is a 3 mana 1/1. You tap it to prevent the next 1 damage that will be dealt to target creature or player this turn, or tap it to make a creature unblockable this turn. So that's a very useful card, based on the fact that it just allows you to interact with the game in a variety of ways and give you options. Next up is Monastery Siege. It is a 3 mana enchantment at the beginning, or when it enters the battlefield, you choose Khans or Dragons. If you choose Khans at the beginning of your draw step, you draw and then you draw an additional card and then discard. Or Dragons, spells your opponent's cast that target you or a permanent you control cost 2 more casts. I personally have always chose Dragons because Khans still kind of has a negative drawback, whereas Dragons, again, just slows down your opponents, which is kind of the goal of these cards. Next up, we have Curse of the Swine. Curse of the Swine is a 2 mana X spell. So you pay 2 blue and X to exile X target creatures, and each creature exiled this way, its controller puts a 2/2 green board creature on the battlefield. So you just blow through your opponent's board. It's a board wipe, but it's a targeted board wipe. So if you pay like 8 mana for X, you kind of just blow up your opponent's good creatures, and yeah, that's pretty sick. Next up is a very busted card because of your life gain. Phyrexian Reclamation is a 1 mana enchantment. You can pay 2 and 2 life to return target creature from your grave to hand. So this will allow you to get a lot of ETB triggers and stuff, and this card just busted because of that. Next up, another busted card, Righteous Aura is a 2 mana enchantment. You can pay 1 mana and 2 life to prevent the next time a source of your choice dealing damage to you this turn. So basically, if my opponent swings for 7, I pay a mana and 2 life, and I take 2 because I paid the 2 life. And so that's a very good card, again, to slow down the damage that you will be taking, especially since if I paid 2 life a turn and I gain 2 life, I'm netting all the life that I gained. Next up is a really fun card. I really just smoked through people in the Guilds of Ravnica pre-release with this card. Thief of Sanity is a 3 mana 2/2 with flying. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 3 cards of that player's library, exile one of them face down, and put the rest into their grave. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may look at it, cast it, and may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. Keep in mind, this is not for as long as Thief of Sanity is on the board. This is as long as that card is exiled. So if I exile that card, I get that card. And it's milling your opponents and denying them cards that they valuably need. Or milling your opponent, I guess. Because this is, again, something that you probably want to target the opponent that has more or less better synergy with your deck. Or covers your weakness. Next up, we have Baird, Steward of Argive. Baird, Steward of Argive is a 4 mana 2/4 with Vigilance. And creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker that you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. This is just a good card because it, again, slows down your opponents and it de-incentivizes them from attacking you because they have to spend the mana. And that's if they're running out of mana, that sucks. Next up, Journey to Nowhere. Journey to Nowhere is a 2 mana enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you exile target creature, and that creature remains exiled for as long as Journey to Nowhere stays on the battlefield. So you basically just say, I want that creature, put it over off to the side. If you have removal, you get it back. If you want to burn removal, you get it back. Next up, Invoke the Divine. 3 mana instant. I think this is like one of the few instants in this deck. I don't even know there's that many. Destroy target artifact or enchantment and gain 4 life. This is a little bit expensive, but white enchantment removal is kind of what we're looking for because there's enchantments that are like, oh, players can't gain life, so that sucks. Tragic Slip is a 1 mana instant. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, or if a creature has died this turn, target creature gets -13/-13 until end of turn. This is useful. You basically just use it for the 13/13. You wait till probably 2 of your opponents interact with each other and the creature's died, and I'm like, I'll stack on top of that because this is my best chance. Killing Wave is a 1 mana X spell. This is beautiful because you have life. For each creature, its controller sacrifices it unless he or she pays X life. So if you make X around 7 or 8-ish, you can afford to pay like 20-something life, and your opponents will want to sack off their board because they don't want to spend that life. Maybe paying 8 to keep their best creature in play. Next up is a very useful card. Slaughter is a 4 mana card with a buyback cost of 4 life, which means if you pay 4 life as you cast it, it returns to your hand after you cast it. And it destroys target non-black creature, and that creature cannot be regenerated. This card is very useful in the fact that you can infinitely cast it, essentially, because as long as you have 4 life to spend. So this is just a removal spell that's basically going to be constantly in your hand if you have it in your hand. And that's very useful. Unmake, 3 hybrid mana, exile target creature. Self-explanatory. Next up, and last, we have Detention Sphere. Detention Sphere is a 3 mana artifact that is similar to Journey or to Nowhere. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent not named Detention Sphere, and all other permanents with the same name as that permanent. When it leaves the battlefield, return the exile cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. The added effect is that this removes tokens. Well, because with Journey to Nowhere, you can only remove 1 token. But let's say my opponent is playing Freyalise and has made like 10 elf tokens. I can exile 1 elf token, which exiles all of them. And if they happen to remove Detention Sphere, which I don't know why they would, because they don't get the tokens back because tokens cease to exist if they leave the battlefield. And so that makes Journey to Nowhere a very good card. Next, we're going to move on to the lands. We have quite a few lands in this deck, just based on the fact that we do need a little bit of help with color fixing. So a lot of our cards cost multiple of one color. So we need to make sure we have that color available to us. For Azorius lands, which is white and blue, we have Azorius Guildgate, which enters tapped. You can add a white or blue to your mana pool. We have Tranquil Cove, which enters tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you gain life. You add a white or blue to your mana pool. And we have Coastal Tower, which enters tapped, and you add a white or blue to your mana pool. Those are all the Azorius ones. I don't know why there's so few Azorius ones, but I tend to not need as much white because white has the least amount of cards in it that need multiple of a certain color. That being said, there's a lot of white mana in this deck in terms of just like planes and stuff, because most of the cards in this deck are white. Next up, in the Dimir side of things, we have Jwar Isle Refuge. When it enters tapped, you gain a life, add blue or black to your mana pool. Salt Marsh enters tapped, add blue or black to your mana pool. Dismal Backwater enters tapped, gain a life, add blue or black to your mana pool. Dimmer Guildgate enters tapped, add blue or black to your mana pool. And Drowned Catacomb enters tapped, unless you control an island or a swamp, add blue or black to your mana pool. That's pretty good. And then last but not least, the Orzhov tap lands. We have Orzhov Guildgate enters tapped, add white or black to your mana pool. Orzhov Basilica enters tapped, bounce a land to your hand, tap it to add white and black to your mana pool. And can't read. Scoured Barrens enters tapped, gain a life, add white or black to your mana pool. So lots of good lands. In terms of helping me mana fix, we have cards. We have the 3 Vivid cards. Vivid Creek enters the battlefield with 2 charge counters on it. You can tap it to add blue or remove a charge counter to add a mana of any color. Vivid Meadow has the same, adding 1 mana of any color by using a charge counter, but it taps for white. And Vivid Marsh the same, but tapping for black. So those are help you mana fix early if you pull them early, and that's why we have them. Next up, we have Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds. You can sack both of these cards. You can sack either one of these cards to search your library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library. Last but not least, in terms of non-basic lands, we have Kabir Crossroads. It enters tapped. You gain 2 life, and you can add a white to your mana pool. Last but not least, the basic lands. We are running 8 plains. We are running 10 swamps, and we are running just 2 islands. Like I said, there's not a whole lot of blue in this deck, and you should be able to draw one of the many Dimir or Azorius tap lands in your deck, or Vivid Marsh. And so, as a result of that, you're not going to be too hard-pressed to get blue. So that is it for the Oloro Ageless Ascetic deck, guys. If you like this deck, please leave a like or comment. If you want me to keep this series going, I have quite a few more decks that I can go through and will go through. And yeah, don't forget to love God, love each other, and I'll see you guys in the next video, guys. Happy planeswalking.